ask me anything about software engineering. So I've had a couple people reach out to me over LinkedIn, asking me about my experience graduating from bootcamp and how was it like applying to jobs. What was the process like? If there was anything I learned through it, and after I started a job too, what was that like? And I figured it'd be good to just consolidate, have everyone come into a group session and we can ask and answer all the questions. Probably different people are going to ask similar questions. So let's just wait for people to show up. In the meantime, I bought the new M1 Mac and I still am super excited about it, but there are some software issues. Hello. I'm just gonna hang out for a bit, wait for I think maybe 2 or 3 more people said they were gonna attend, and then we can start with the questions. So maybe at 2:05 we'll start. But in the meantime, this M1, the new hype, it's fast, but it doesn't work with some core developer softwares that I need. For example, Brew, it's one of the things that you need to install Yarn, and Yarn allows you to do a lot of the coding stuff that you need. So I found a workaround. It wasn't very straightforward, but that's just the beginning. There's more stuff that I'm finding that the M1 is just not compatible with. And I think I'm gonna have to spend the rest of my day just like figuring how to make stuff work on that machine. Hello, we're gonna start in 2 more minutes. Oh, can you hear me okay? Trying out this new mic. Okay, it's 2:05, so we'll get started. Quick intro, I'm a Flatiron grad. Hello, hi. And I've been working in software engineering for about 1.5 years, going on 2 years now. I'm primarily a front-end engineer, so I work mostly in React, but I also do some Node, some Python, very little, and some Go every once in a while. So I know what it's like trying to get into tech. It's really hard. Like I spent $15,000. Like that's not a small amount. And there's also the risk of, will this even work? That it's actually a fear of, will this even work? So I know where you're coming from. So I'll open up the floor if anyone has any questions they'd like to start off with. Okay. Well, if not, there what are some questions that a friend of a friend asked me in LinkedIn DM? He couldn't attend, so he wrote it down. So I'll just go over those questions and maybe we'll riff off of that and keep going from there. So the first question he had was, what should I be doing post-grad to improve? I.e. learn more languages, get better at what I know, make projects. Obviously, I assume this is an overarching theme of the stream. Okay, so what should you be doing in the meantime between applying to jobs and right after graduating from either college or bootcamp, right? So what suggestion is make one particular exceptional portfolio piece. Because then I made a mistake of I made 4 and they were all like pretty similar in terms of the technology that was being used. So when it came to the interview, even though I had like more pieces, what I could talk about was still the same. So it's better to just focus on one, make it really good, throw in a lot of like different things that showed you learned and you grew. That way you have more talking points. So like, for example, what I did was I made 4 React apps and they were all using, at the time I only knew Ruby as a backend. They were all using Ruby as the backend. And it was like, well, I explained that for this first app. The second app, I'm just going to repeat myself. So that's pointless. Instead, what I would recommend is maybe you use Ruby for this one app and then you evolve it, maybe throw in WebSockets for if you want to add chat messaging or anything else. You could like throw in different technology and just let it keep evolving and growing. That way you grow as a developer and you also are more impressive during the interview too. Learn more languages, I would say not particularly because when they're hiring, either you apply to the stack that you know already, or you're taking a long shot at a language that you don't know, hoping that they'll give you a chance. But then it's better to just demonstrate that you're really strong at the language that you do know. Then it'll give people the faith that you can learn a new language. Whereas if you're average at all of maybe like 2 or 3 languages, that doesn't really help you stand out from the rest of the candidate pool. So just keep going all in on, maybe you start with JavaScript, then keep improving on JavaScript. If you start on Java, keep improving on Java. Just get stronger at the one thing, and that's really your strongest selling point. Especially when you have like no years of experience, it's better to just show mastery of one thing because they're not expecting you to be a master of everything. It's just, that's not realistic, right? Okay, so we have a question from Shiki. Am I saying that right? I am non-CS background. Yeah, I was too. If I want to get a software engineer job, should I start by learning web development? Oh, that is a good question. For a lot of people, at least for me, when I first started, I didn't know what was the difference. Like data scientist, web development, I mean, it's all code, right? So for me, I was like, I'm gonna try both and see which one I like more. So it depends heavily on your personality, like what are your traits. Like for web development, it's more about creation, building something from nothing or improving something that exists. For data scientists, it's, oh, I don't know. I can't speak about that because I'm not a data scientist. But you gotta like dabble in both and see which one you like more, even though they're both code related. Like the code is the means to getting the thing done, but the outcome is very different. So yeah, for front end, back end, yeah, you're gonna want to learn both and see which one appeals to you more. For me, front end appealed to me personally because I like seeing the results. Like I'm like I need immediate gratification kind of person. So then I like seeing the thing work in real time right in front of my eyes. Whereas for backend, it's a bit more, if it works, it just works. You don't get like that visual gratification. It's just the error goes away. So, but you're gonna need to learn both eventually to really be effective as a developer. So it's just a matter of picking which one you like more and specializing in that. As far as learning web development goes, JavaScript would be your language of choice for that, because a lot of the web is built with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML gives you like let me share my screen. We demonstrate that better. Let's go to Reddit. So share that. Okay. So like, for instance, this Reddit page, this is HTML, like the body, head tags, script div, that stuff. The CSS is what gives it like these rounded corners and makes it look pretty. Otherwise, you're just gonna have black and white text, right? And you can add padding and whatnot. But then the JavaScript, this is what allows you to create engagement with the user. So like if I click this button, this form pops up, right? So stuff like that. You could do logic in here. If I click Google versus clicking Apple, different things happen. So that's JavaScript. So that, definitely get started learning JavaScript if you want to get into web development. Is there a bootcamp you're looking at, or are you trying to learn on your own? Oh, let me do it again. Sorry, need to click that button. Okay. So Reddit. All right, so let's open up the console. So this is HTML, the HTML head, body, divs, right? Similar to the MySpace days if you messed around with MySpace. And then there's CSS, which gives you like the padding. We see background color, probably, yeah, white. That's saying the background color is white. And then the JavaScript is what really like evolves the experience. You could like interact with the page. I could click this, a form comes up. If I click the Google button, this comes up. But if I click the Apple button, then a different form comes up. So it gives you logic and create different paths. Online course, backend, I found nice. That's a great place to start. And in fact, I feel like a lot of these online courses give you so much more value than what you're paying. So like I paid $15,000 for a bootcamp, and then I took a $10 online Udemy course just out of curiosity, is like comparing the two. And I found that that $10 online course gave just as much information as the $15,000 in real in classroom course that I took. But I mean, there is the trade-off of like you having the classroom forces you to be accountable. Also, if you're paying that much money, you're gonna want to go all the way through. But as far as content goes, I find these $10 courses are amazing. So backend. Any question about a backend? I could answer a little bit to it. I know there are different options, like you could do MongoDB or you could do Postgres. So which one are you working with? Okay, move on to next question I've had. How did you find your first role? What was it like joining a company as a new programmer? Oh, also, I'll answer your question right after. They're kind of related. So my first role, I had connections from like my friends, but then I didn't really feel comfortable like reaching out to them after maybe like 4 years of not really having spoke and then asking for a job. That was kind of weird to me, so I didn't do that, even though my advisor recommended to do that. The internet recommended to do that. It was just not in my comfort zone. So what I did was I applied to a lot of jobs, like just code applying, and it was like to a point where I was falling asleep at my computer filling out job applications over and over again. Don't do what I did. Ask your friends. It's the smarter route to go. And like in hindsight, I realized like it's not that I'm using them. It's like I'm asking them for help, and if they ever needed help in the future, I would reciprocate. Because then the bottom line is, if they reached out to me, would I be willing to help them? And the answer is yes. So it's kind of silly to think the way that I did. But yeah, for me, if you are applying to companies, I would recommend startups, just because when you don't have that much experience, your chances of getting a response, like just getting a phone interview and not an automatic rejection, is higher with startups, because larger companies are more prone to hire people with experience, and startups are more willing to take a chance, and they're also more willing to take to like really, yeah. I mean, it's startup mentality, take risks. And as a new engineer with no experience, you are a risk. But what you need to do is just demonstrate you're capable of learning fast, and that you can contribute like to based off of what you know. So like if you already know JavaScript, you can talk JavaScript. And the website that I found most helpful was Angel Co. It's like a job board for startups specifically. I got the most responses there. For like example, when I applied through LinkedIn, I would apply to maybe like 10 companies, get one response that is not a rejection. But then when I applied through Angel Co, I was getting like maybe 3 times the response. I mean, it's also depends on your personal goal, because then it's not impossible to get a job at a larger company with no years of experience. It's just harder. So like with a startup, you will be expected to work more than normal. Like overtime is more of a possibility, I would say. It definitely was for me when I started out. So answering the second part, what was it like joining a company as a new programmer? So when I started out, I freaked out. Like I knew I could code in React, but when I saw the React that this company had been using, it was like 5 years old of worth of code. It was just massive, and it was just terrifying me, because to create one feature, it maybe had like 3 files involved, and each file had 500 lines of code. So it's 1,500 lines of code that just to do this particular thing that I don't know anything about. And I found it took me maybe around 2 weeks to get used to it, to realize like what I'm looking at is still at the core of it, just React. You just gotta like trace it down from function to the next function, and then it'll slowly start to make sense. And as you come back to that file more often, it also starts to make more sense. As you add more code to it that you've written, it'll make more sense. So it's a slow but gradual process of getting used to it. Now, I will say that because you're not the only developer, there are many developers contributing to this app. You are going to be constantly reminded that you don't know this piece of code, and you're going to have to learn it. So like I might have created a feature in this particular file maybe like 3 months ago, and then I come back to it for improvement, right? I want to add more code to it, and I'll find the file is very different from what I left it as, and then you have to relearn it. But that's the process. That's the job. So about front end, back end, DevOps. Yeah. So for front end, I find if you like having more tools to work with, like let me do screen share again. So for example, oops, I don't want to share that. So let's go to Reddit again. That's just easy. So for front end, there's a lot of tools to help you. Like for example, with browser console, this tool thing is very effective for helping you do your job in the front end world. So like for example, there's this console. You could do console log in the code, and it'll come out here, so you can start debugging stuff here. Also, if you see errors, it'll tell you like what's going on, what's wrong. And also if you want to like inspect the the elements on the page. Like, for example, if I want to see what this div is doing in terms of the class name, what CSS it is applied to it, it's very robust. So like I can inspect anything on this page as I want, and I can even edit it in real time to like see changes quickly. For example, if I change this text, wherever, yep, that changed right there. So I could start messing around with it, right? And then if I want to change the font size, I could do that. So having, I find like doing front-end work is very enjoyable because the Chrome browser helps you a lot. You can see network requests that are made. For example, if I refresh the page, so you can see the stuff that is going in and out. Let me change not WebSocket, but XHR. So we can see here are all the different requests that were made. We're grabbing an MP4 file for some reason. I don't know, this is Reddit, but they're doing a bunch of stuff, and we could like inspect and see like, hey, what requests passed or failed. You could see like what was returned. Like here we see some data was returned. So it's very nice to you. That's why I like front end. For backend, you have console log, which is helpful, but it's a bit more abstract because then you don't have this graphical user interface that helps you. Like you don't have this this browser tool that tells you what is happening in real time related to a specific piece of what you're seeing. As for DevOps, DevOps is more like support so that the front end and back end engineers could do their job smoothly. For example, handling deployments to like, let's say, from local development to staging to production. So the way larger companies work is you have local development where you're just in your own computer coding, testing things, messing around, breaking things, making sure it works before you send it to staging, where at that point is like a middle ground between what the users see and where you're making sure that the feature you just worked on is good to go before you send it to production. And production is the real app that users see. So like, for example, reddit.com, this is the production app. And then if they had a staging, it depends on what they call it. It could be like staging.reddit.com or whatever. And then that's like, you need credentials to be able to access that site, but it's basically a replica of reddit.com. But you just want to make sure stuff is working good and you didn't break anything before you send it to the real reddit.com. So what DevOps does is they ensure this whole process is smooth. So like, for example, the staging.reddit.com is always a close to perfect match of reddit.com. They ensure that the code that gets pushed from your environment to staging, there's no errors, or like it's a successful cycle. So like you don't have to, as a developer, go in and figure out why did my deploy fail. So the DevOps team would figure out why did the deploy fail. Maybe the backend service, maybe it's you're using Amazon to host your entire app. Maybe it's a third-party problem and something went down. So like they would figure that out. That's only one of the things they do. I'm not DevOps, so I don't know everything about it. But yeah, they're generally support for the engineering team. And they also work in code to do what they do too. So like, I didn't talk about backend that much. So backend, they handle the data. So like every time someone signs up, you create an account, that data has to get stored somewhere. Or like if you create a post, that data gets stored somewhere. Because if I refresh the page, it's still around because now we're pulling that data from the database, which is handled. Let's see if we can find this. Let's see, screen view reddit.com. So if I were to click into that, some stuff happens. Reddit or data, what is data? All right, so if we keep clicking, we will eventually find the data that it matches exactly the words here. So that's coming from a database, and oh yeah, sure, I'll answer that next. So the backend team, they would manage like when the front end makes a request with some kind of information, what should we do with that information? Maybe when we want to store the post, but we don't want to store the time it was created. Maybe we do want to store the time it was created. So stuff like that. So the backend can manage some of that logic. That's called server side. I think something like that. I'm not a backend engineer, so I don't know the terminology that well. But server side logic. So you generally want to do more stuff like logic stuff on the back end, because then the front end is only one way to interact with the site. But for example, the company that I work with, we have two interfaces. People could access our engage with our app through the terminal. So it's like instead of clicking things, they would type stuff in here to like do a command. And that's a second interface, but both methods of interacting through this terminal or interacting with the website where you click things relies on the API. So as a backend engineer, if your company does have like two means of interacting with the app, then they need to be able to manage like both sides of things need to work. So it's interesting in that aspect, and like it does open a lot of different realms where front end is kind of like it's its own space, and you don't really see all of the other stuff that's going on. But then at some point, I feel like everyone does touch both. Like for example, I started as front end, but I'm doing some more back end as of the past 6 months too. So what kind of projects would you put on your resume to get you an interview? I would say make it look modern as opposed to flashy, because then a lot of the bootcamp grads I found liked to make flashy apps, like a lot of glowing effects, because it was new, it was fun. You want to like, it's kind of like a toy. You want to mess around with it and give it character, right? So, but the problem with that is if everyone's doing it, it kind of makes you blend in, and also makes your app look less professional. So instead, I would recommend taking the the less likely route of just making a generic looking website. So like if you go to Squarespace, right, for example, spelled that wrong, no, I did it right. Okay, so Squarespace, it's very clean. It's like, it's not like there's nothing glowing, blinking, flashing, fonts are not curved or whatnot, right? So it's very modern looking, sleek. I recommend taking this route because it'll make you stand out from the rest by miles. And even though you're using the same technology, it just comes down to the styling. It's just more appealing to the to the employers, basically. Yeah. I do highly recommend a library called Material UI. If you want to create like this style of clean looking websites, because Material UI uses Google's design system. So like, for example, this button, darn it, it went away. But if we go to buttons, components. So like you notice anytime I click something, it has a nice little effect. So like that is a very Google thing, but it's also very professional, clean, sleek. So like you could use this library to build your website, and it'll be like pre-styled for you. And yeah, I just 100% recommend it. I wish I learned about it sooner. I learned about it like maybe 2 months ago after I got the job over a year ago. So this is most used with React. It's a JavaScript framework for building websites. But I think it also works with native JavaScript. But in terms of the kind of project, it could be about anything. As long as you're demonstrating that you know how to use the technology that you're showcasing. Like for example, if you're using React, then you want to make sure your website is using React Redux or React hooks. Yeah, so make sure you're showcasing the right things that you want to be hired for. Okay, and let's move that over. So next prepared question we have is, how do you stay up to date on the latest trends? That's good question, debatable topic. So like for me, I lean more towards the side of don't fall into the latest trend, because a trend is at the end of the day a trend. So like if I'm constantly trying to learn the latest most popular thing, I'm just going to be mediocre at it at best. What I do instead is I would not deliberately look for the trend, but keep working on what I was working on. Like for example, hooks came out in 2018, but it took 2 years to become just starting to become more widely adopted. But we wouldn't have known that in 2018. It could have been like, maybe it was just hype, but then by 2020, there's a new thing and no one really uses hooks. Then I just wasted 2 years. So what I do instead is I wait. Like I don't want to be the early adopter. I want to wait and make sure the industry accepts it and is trying to move towards the thing before I start investing my time into learning it. It's like I've now been doing hooks more because I know this is now the future for sure. And TypeScript, that's been around for more than 2 years and is getting more widely adopted. So yes, be aware of the trend, but don't always go chasing the trend. What else? So, but if you do want to like be aware, I find Twitter is the best place to keep up to date. It's just brief notifications, and if you see like something is repeatedly showing up, then you know that's getting hot. Yeah, I recommend Twitter for that. How long is your resume? Should we put it in 1 page or 2? That actually depends person to person. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but it's because of your prior experience. So if you have prior experience that is relevant, even if it's not coding, maybe it's a leadership related, maybe it's communication related, you want that stuff on your resume. So then you're actually trying to fit but like 2 careers into 1 page. That's going to be hard, right? So if you are fresh out of college and don't have that much experience, then yeah, you could totally keep it to 1 page. But I think that 1 page rule is kind of outdated now with the current climate of HR. That they're more acceptable of having longer resumes because they understand like it's just not that feasible to squeeze everything into a tiny page and not have tiny font. So if you go into 2 pages, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But you just want to make sure where you put stuff is strategically located. So like by default, people will scan from top to bottom, right? So you want to make sure the most relevant information is at top and the least relevant at the bottom. You want to make sure the skills, so like the technical skills for engineering jobs especially, are very visible. Maybe have an isolated section just to list the different tech stack that you know. I've seen that very commonly, and it proves to be successful. Okay. And the last question we have prepared, but we don't have to end here, is how do you feel about unpaid internships? I say take it, because when you don't have experience, it's so hard to convince people to give you a chance. And also, like, as you're doing the internship, you can still keep applying to other jobs. So you can line up the next thing immediately. And an internship is generally about 3 months, so it's not that detrimental to your timeline. But do be careful of what internship you're taking, because then if you're not learning or practicing the skills that you want, then that is still a wasted time. So like you want to make sure the company is willing to give you a chance to do the thing, like to actually do the code, or even better, if they're willing to train you, then yeah, take the internship. If they're vague about it and it's like, oh yeah, you're just gonna do stuff, then that's maybe a red flag. Did you get a referral or just purely applied? Yeah, I just purely applied. that was not the best route. I do not recommend it. It took me so much longer than it could have if I just asked my friends for referrals. I think it was 4 months after graduating from boot camp that I finally accepted a job offer. But it was interesting because then when I started getting like deeper into the interview process, it like all hit at once. So like for the first 4 months, it was like nothing. It's just like people, no, maybe it was like the first 3 months. It was nothing. No one responded. It was automated rejections. And then at some point, the fourth month, it just all hit at once. I was starting to get overwhelmed with the amount of interviews, phone interviews, in-person interviews, coding challenges. At some point, I had to reject coding challenges because it was just like, it's not realistic. Some of it was in Java, and it was like, I don't know Java, and if I start learning now, then I have to stop applying to the other stuff. But then there's still other coding challenges that I could do that is in JavaScript. So it was like, it was one of those things where it dips like in terms of activity, and then it spikes. So then it's gonna get very depressing. I'm sorry to say this, but at least for me and for several people that I knew, the first couple months is going to get very depressing. It feels like you're inadequate and no one wants to give you a chance, but that's not true. It just takes time. Because then when you apply to a company, they don't see it immediately. It may take maybe a month or two or even longer before a human gets their hands on the digital resume that you sent. So don't fret during the beginning. Just keep at it, and you'll be okay. Wow, what happened? You refine your resume, or they just rely? What do you mean, just rely? So I didn't actually refine my resume that much. It was like good to go from the beginning. I made small tweaks here and there, but like I had a career counselor help me through it, and she said I had all the things that I needed, and I stuck with the same resume throughout most of it. Yeah, it just took them a very long time to reply. I believe that's just the nature of applying without a referral. When you have a referral, they respond to you immediately. But when you don't have a referral, you're like last on the to look at list, and that sucks. But definitely, like, even if you don't have immediate friends who are in the software engineer industry, you definitely have friends of friends who are. Like, for example, the person that reached out to me with the list of questions was a friend of a friend. I've never met him personally, but this is good because now I can help him through the process. Like, there are things that he doesn't have to make mistakes that I've made mistakes, and can tell him, hey, maybe it's better if you just reach out to people and try to get referrals, right? So that's that. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? If not, okay. What kind of questions you got in your tech? Oh yeah. I got a lot of JavaScript related questions because my role was heavily JavaScript. It was very casual though, I would say. They didn't give me any algorithms because they gave me a coding challenge beforehand, and they really liked the result of that. So it was more behavioral, just making sure like I'm a decent person to work with and that I know how to do JavaScript. So I find for smaller companies like startups, they lean less towards algorithms. For larger companies, they do more algorithms. I think it's just a belief system. So like these large companies believe like, and also like just having the sheer amount of applications. When you have like 1,000 applicants, the easiest way to eliminate people is just give them an algorithm. Either they pass or they don't. But then you're also losing a chance on actual skill. I feel like, because someone could be good at algorithm but not know how to do web development that well, because they're two different skills really. Whereas for startups, they have less applicants, so they can invest more time into spending like to actually interview each individual person. So they don't rely on algorithms as heavily. But if you like algorithms and are good at it, it definitely helps either way. So like I did a lot of algorithm prepping, and I was kind of disappointed when they didn't ask me out any algorithms. But yeah, it is what it is. It comes down to where and who you're playing for. And if you even make it to a technical interview, you're like 90% there. Like they pretty much want you. You just need to like be cheerful and they'll hire you. Because like to even get to the technical interview, it means you passed the phone interview with an HR person. You passed a either Zoom or in-person oh, probably not. Well, maybe. Or Zoom or in-person interview with one of the engineers or two. And then you did the code challenge. And then you're finally in for the final round interview where I think I had 5 people interview me. And also other people that I knew from bootcamp, they also had around the same amount of people interview you. So like that's a lot of time in terms of employee resources that the company has invested in you already. So yeah, if you're at that stage, you're pretty much set. Cool. Any other questions, Shiki? Okay, if not, we can end at 2:45, and it's a good time to get lunch. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for coming, and hope I was helpful. And yeah, if you're on Meetup, I'll be hosting other events. Maybe it'll be relatable, and you can come through. Okay, cool. Thank you. Have a good day.